Hello and welcome to Chess Please. My name is Andy, and today I wanted to talk to you about the difference between a very good player and an excellent player, or in this specific case, the difference between a 1700 rated player and a 2000 rated player. Now, being in the mid 1800 range myself, I have played a fair few number of games against 1700 rated players and a fair few number of games against 2000 rated players. And you might think that there is just sort of like a general turning up of the knobs to a 2000 rated player, that they're just a little bit better at the opening, a little bit better at the middle game tactics, and a little bit better at the end game. And there's probably some truth to that, but on a game to game basis, you might not necessarily see that coming through. But one thing that I've felt very distinctly and very starkly as a difference from moving out of the 1700s into the 1800s and playing more players in that 2000 rated range is the doggedness, the determinedness, and the bounce back ability of those higher rated players far exceeds that of the 1700, 1800 rated player. When things go wrong for the 2000s and the 1900s, they generally, they react very well and they make the best of it, and they don't resign. They hang in there, they cling in there, they make it awkward. Whereas in the 1700s, 1600s, in general, of course, this is all generalized, I do find there is a bit of a tendency, like when a blunder happens, if you go a piece behind or you drop an exchange, that player will just resign. And often when a player resigns against me, that's a huge relief. So I want to highlight this in more crystalline terms here with two specific games. So here we have a game I played against a 1700 rated player very recently. And I won't go too deep into the whole game, but we'll breeze through it and I'll pause at the critical moments. But basically they wanted to get into a Smith-Morra gambit here, and I hate the Smith-Morra. I hate playing against it. I think it's ferociously dangerous. So I play a little kind of Scandinavian sort of thing where we actually kind of proffer up this d-pawn and see how they deal with that and avoid the majority of their Smith-Morra prep that tends to absolutely rain fire down the centre of the board and just gets them out of that explosiveness. So it's a fine opening. I'm not 100% happy with it, but it's what we play. Anyway, we move on here, and both of us playing fine, nothing crazy, mistake-wise or good play-wise. Just developing our pieces, just getting everything where it needs to be. And ultimately we grab a little sort of vaguely poisoned pawn here, where we grab that with the bishop. The rook slides across. We've got to get the bishop out of there, and the rook can take our pawn on b7. And it's just a little bit hairy because that pawn was defending this knight, and that's going to come into effect very soon. We castle. We probably had other priorities rather than castling immediately. The bishop attacking here I thought was a brilliant move. The computer obviously thinks it's a mistake, and the reason is if we move this knight, let's say we move it anywhere, move it here. I mean, here it's being captured by this knight, so we can't move the knight there. So if we were to move this knight away, let's say over here, then the knight could come in here with check and take our bishop for free, which is very annoying. So I was like, okay, well, I don't really want that. I want to defend this knight and maybe worry about this threat here as well. But the computer rightly points out, if I were to move my knight over here and they go in like this and they attack and we move our king and they take our bishop, we can take their rook. So we have a bigger stick in that case. I didn't need to be as worried. But what we did in the end was we moved our queen up here, which was kind of the worst of both worlds, because now they can just take this knight, which they do. We'll just put this on the board. They take this knight, and I can't capture back this bishop, because then the knight would jump in here with check and capture our queen. So that's no good. That's a mistake. Not great. They're winning. But listen, we'll do what we can. We grab a little pawn there, get a little greedy, grab the h-pawn there with our bishop, given that we have this queen-bishop battery. That's all fine. King gets out of the way. He has to. It's his only move. We move the king just to avoid the shenanigans of knight check, queen getting taken in here. But ultimately, we move our bishop out of the way, not to lose a free piece. Queen trades off. That's fine. So at this point, we are not that far behind materially. I think we are one pawn behind in the case of material. But in terms of actual activity, our bishops are okay, but they're a little bit dumb. They've got a rook on the 7th rank. They've got our kings are relatively safe. It's a very even game, but I would prefer to play as white here. I think there's a little more happening for white in this case. And the computer thinks so too. They are +2 on the eval bar. And that's all fine. And then they move their knight here, which isn't a great move because we're able to take this knight, just trade off this bishop for the knight. And when we do that, that frees up this square for our rook to come in here and basically skewer the bishop and the knight. So it's, two pieces that can't defend each other. Something has to give. And at this point, my opponent resigned. My opponent resigned because he saw this. He saw that I was going to either take his bishop, or if he moves his bishop, I'm going to take his knight. But like, because they made a blunder, in their head they made a blunder, and that is just so very short-sighted, and again quite indicative of what I've found playing players in the 1700, 1600 range. You really just have to get one over on them. Whereas we made a mistake that was worse than this earlier in the game. We were able to cling on and make the best of it. We took that pawn up there. And I'm not saying I have that doggedness, but I like to think I'm hard to beat. But they resigned in this case, even though if they just take here and we take the knight, like, if you look at this, we're up one pawn here. Like, no one should resign if they're down one pawn with like 3 pieces left on the board. No pass pawns as well. Like, these pawns sort of cancel each other out. In fact, they can just take this pawn, and like, there's trouble at mill. They've got a pass pawn now. I'm the one who's up against the cosh, and we're all square on material wise. But my opponent resigned because in their head they made a blunder. Blunders are stupid. Stupid people shouldn't play chess. Resign. A complete fallacy. You're going to make a blunder most games you play, if not a mistake, or at the very least a missed opportunity. So this was a nice freebie, and when they resigned, I was incredibly relieved. So moving from this game where we got a nice free easy win after a very vague mistake, barely even a blunder by our opponent. Now we look at the game that we played against a 2000 rated player, or in this case they were 1966 rated when I played them. They've since gone up to be 240, I checked today, so they're a very handy player. They've been as high as 2080. So I was very much on guard. I was very much locked in trying to win this game. Which very much surprised me when on move, I want to say it's move 13. So again, we play a pretty standard opening here, nothing too crazy, just getting our pieces out. We pin this knight here, which is very, very classic fare in this kind of Sicilian-y sort of open. And again, they take good control of the center. But we're pretty happy with how we're set up, to be honest. Nothing here has gone too wrong. We have all our minor pieces in play. We've got our rooks connected, queen off the back rank. Just very standard stuff. And then out of absolutely nowhere, my 2000 rated opponent blunders their queen. In one move, just forgets that the knight was being pinned, maybe saw a ghost and thought that this knight was moving to attack the queen. Some sort of fallacy. They just blunder their queen. And I'm thinking, okay, unbelievable. We've just won a game against a 2000 rated player. And then they just keep playing. And again, you know me, I'm very much not of the opinion that you should resign if you have any sort of chance. But I was kind of more in hope than expectation that they would resign, that they've just blundered their queen. Pretty simply, pretty egregiously blundered their queen. But what they do is they just consolidate. They just hang in there. And I'll give a spoiler alert. We won't go through the very depths of this game. But you can see they're just slowly improving their pieces. They're just slowly opening things up. We're trying to put the squeeze on as well. We're trying to get our queen in the mix. They defend like an absolute lion here. And again, I won't dredge this game, but I just wanted to highlight, they make this game that they blundered their queen on move 13 and got very little compensation for it. I think they got 1 bishop for it on move 13. And they are able to make all sorts of really annoying threats and just play really well, make some really great moves, threaten to trap our queen a lot, get their pieces like unbelievably well coordinated and just well defended around the king. Now, ultimately, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because we had a full extra queen. But it gets down to be very, very hairy. So we're up 5 points of material here. But eventually they just start chipping away at that. And I start getting a little nervy and I start thinking, okay, well, maybe we can give back some of that material in order to get some of this material off the board. But like, we're not that far away from like blundering let's say a permanent repetition or blundering our queen or something like that. There was so many chances that we had in this game to throw this all away. And eventually we get down to a queen versus rook, which isn't too bad, pretty handy enough to finish off. But my God, we get to play on up until move 56, when eventually something just had to give. They were running low on time, but eventually we were able to win their rook. And at that point they did resign, because there really isn't a way out of this one. But My word, I was getting very nervy. You know, I used quite up a lot of my time. I was almost getting into time pressure, but thankfully so were they. But that is the difference that I have found is when something goes wrong for the 2000 rated player, they will scratch and claw and eke and squeeze and hold on for dear life and make you prove that you can beat them without a queen. And it is not that easy because they're really, really good at chess. Again, they're a little bit better at various different things. But this is the big one. This is one where I have time and time again lost in these positions, time and time again drawn or run out of time in these positions. Whereas if we compare that to our other game where we got just a free win out of a very, very drawn, if not difficult to win position for my opponent. But maybe they were winning. Either way, it certainly wasn't decisive. The computer has it 0-0, so computer sees a draw coming here. In reality, it doesn't always work out like that, but my God, that was an absolute cheap one. This is like a contrast between the cheapest win I've ever had and maybe the most expensive win I've ever had in terms of resources I've had to spend versus how winning or losing we actually were. So that is a real difference, and I think there's a lesson here because that isn't about book learning. It's not about spending hours and hours on opening preparation or anything like that. That is just about sticking in and being an absolute fiend when you're trying to get beaten, a rat trapped in a corner, as it were. A lot of respect for my 2000 rated player. That was really, really well done. Very much more nervy than it should be for a game where they blundered their queen on move 13. So that's the real difference, and that is something I would encourage for each and every one of you. Be very difficult to beat. Be very annoying to beat. Cling and claw and grab in there. And don't worry about people being like, oh, you know, it's etiquette to resign and you're wasting people's time. It's like, if you're wasting people's time, they shouldn't have signed up. We both have a time limit in chess, okay? And also, resign if you don't want to play anymore. You don't have to play forever. But just know that you can never win a game you resign. So that is my little soapbox there. Thankfully, we showed 2 games which I won, so that's great. And yeah, encourage you all to be as hard to beat as possible, and most importantly, enjoy your chess. Feel free to stick around and subscribe for more chess content like this, and I hope you have a great day. All the best.